needed. Do not lose your sense of humor. When challenged, remember, it's not all about you. When screamed at, remember, it is not all about you. And sometimes has nothing to do with you. And so just listen. And drink wine.
Yes. That's good advice. And you exercise too.
Sure.
Yeah. So exercise, drink wine,
Well,
sleep well.
Yes. Oh, I'm a sleeper.
Sleep
too.
well.
Oh, I'm a good sleeper. I'm telling you, I can sleep.
I'm a mess when I don't sleep.
Oh, I am too. I need 8 to 10 during the week, 10 to 12 on the weekends, so I can bank them. And that's all my life. Got to have that. But then, I mean, really what it comes down to it, if I don't feel good and I'm not in a place where I can take on some other people's anxiety or nervousness or sadness. I mean, you know, as a leader, you get approached by everyone, and people are sharing stories with you that you don't necessarily need to hear. Yeah. And yet, because they're sharing them with you, you need to hear. Yeah. And so, to be able to take that on and carry that, like you've got to feel good and be on your game to do that work. Otherwise, it beats you down.
It will.
Yes.
Even when you're on your game and at your best, you listen to some stories and they beat you down.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
Oof.
Yep. I am at Ellis Elementary School.
How's everything over there?
Everything is fabulous, especially compared to the last couple of years, right? I mean, it's so fun, number one, to be in a school again with our students without masks, with parents in the building, to see smiles again. Fabulous. You'll always have your staffing issues. You'll always have your hiccups every single year, you know?
Yeah.
And that's part of our gig. But seeing the joy again in full classrooms and, you know, a full school versus dealing with a lot that were weeded out doing online for an additional year. But, yeah, it's been good.
Everything is going. What are the most critical things that you're trying to solve for over there this year?
Yeah, it'll probably sound familiar. So implementation of a new curriculum, it's always going to be a lift, right? Especially for the teachers, quite honestly. It's a lot to learn. It's a lot to plan for. And there's space I always have to carve out to think about what are the priorities in regards to what we're delivering and how can I support, right, and remove hurdles. So that's always one. Staffing is always an issue, so you're probably dealing with that too. Our special ed staffing not having enough, period. And I don't think it's just statewide. I think it's a national issue. Substitute teachers still not recovered yet from the pandemic with that. I would say the normal. That's what, I mean, everything I'm naming right now is really what we all struggle with probably every year to some extent or another. So now just family engagement is huge. We have quite a few newcomers. So we have more than 30 different languages spoken.
More than 30?
Yes. It's
wow.
Very, very diverse. People don't know that necessarily by driving by or just hearing about it, but a very diverse school. So we have every different language I can think of. Arabic and Spanish, obviously, are the big two. But we also have Pashto. We just had a new family that moved in. There's 4 students.
What country is that language spoken?
Afghanistan.
Okay.
So Afghanistan, we either get the Farsi or Pashto. And so my teachers have become, so skilled, I would say, at serving our newcomers. And what we found is, even though we have a newcomer school down the street place, is that once these communities start, and so then you have families that are hosting family members or friends, and they all want to attend the same school together. And that's very important for them. And really, there's such a support for one another that it is important, I think, that the families be able to stay together. So as some of our communities continue to bring in new family members or friends or whatever it may be, it's we get the newcomers, and they're well aware, that there's a newcomer school. But again, it's more important that their own small little community
stays together.
Yes. And so, of course, we honor that.
Of course. And Ellis is obviously the school where you currently are, but your leadership story goes back to your years as a teacher. You were middle school, high school,
yes,
elementary as well, I believe. I
Yeah.
wonder if you can just walk us through your whole journey.
Sure. So when I graduated, I first got a job with Jefferson County. And that was as a middle school teacher teaching 8th grade. And the funny part about it is all of my family is Denver Public Schools, right? Like, my parents graduated from Denver Public Schools. My grandma retired from DPS, as did my aunt. And so when I said, I'm going to start teaching, and I'm the oldest grandchild and oldest child of my parents, they immediately said, well, you haven't gotten a job in Denver? Where have you applied? And I said, well, I went to a fair, and honestly, this is how I got the job. And it happened to be my old principal, who was my principal in middle school. And then, knowing my personality, why in the world he would hire me, we do not know. Maybe he was curious. So I started teaching 8th grade.
What do you mean?
Because I'm a positive deviant, and I always have been, only a little more rebellious.
The rebellious, I see. Positive deviant, I don't know exactly what that means.
It means that I'm a deviant. I'm willing to deviate from whatever box you put me in.
Yeah.
But in a way that's going to gain a positive outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm willing to say, I think there's a better way to do it. Or, no, I'm not doing that. That sounds like compliance, and I don't see anything that's going to benefit me, my school, my kids. No. That's positive deviant.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's there's probably other terms for it, but I like mine better. It sounds a little bit more professional.
Yeah.
And so then I was just always
So
eighth
sorry
grade.
to interrupt you. I have seen
Yeah.
you be a positive deviant, and that's a very good thing.
See,
I love that.
see. And I feel like if you do it in a smooth way with a smile and maybe just crack a joke a little bit.
He works better.
Right? Yes. I've tried to pull it off with more of a stern voice, and it just didn't go over as well.
So your principal hired you.
So my principal hired me, and that's how I really started in middle school. Fell in love with middle school. Later, of course, I went to Denver, family, dad, of course. I was at Hamilton Middle School. I think I was there for 15 years, teaching 8th grade. I was then the student advisor then, back in the day when the district had student advisors. And that was all discipline all day. Ooh, there is not a lot of joy in that job, let me tell you.
No.
And then I became an assistant principal there. And then I went from middle school to becoming the principal at Gust. And the wonderful part about that step in my journey is that being my first principalship, that was also the school where my dad served his first time as a school principal. And he was there for 10 years. And so it was just so funny that out of the blue, gosh, who would have called me? Robert Woodson. That's exactly who called me and said, and it was on the last day of school, and he said, listen, I need to introduce a principal to the staff for next year. Are you willing to take on Gust? And I was like, oh, my goodness. Like, that sounds lovely. Yes, of course. And he goes, well, you got to get over here. You got to come meet the staff, right? And so he was telling me, now, do you know how to get there? And I said, oh, Robert, of course I know how to get there. You know, my dad was the principal there. And, of course, he said, oh, my gosh, no, who's your dad? And so I told him, and then he started laughing because he was brought into the district the same year my dad was, and they were roommates at a leadership retreat for new principals. Isn't it a small world?
What a small world. That's just crazy.
I know. So, yeah, fell in love. Oh, my gosh. My favorite job ever, I think, honestly, and I was telling you that earlier, is being a school leader. I absolutely love it. My favorite. I get to still work a lot with kids. Granted, a lot of the time it's in a supervisory kind of role, but still able to build relationships, get to advocate for them, get to advocate for my teachers and my staff, who I believe in so much. And like I said, remove hurdles, provide resources, oftentimes just get out of their way, because when you got the right people in the right spot, it's magic.
It is. How many siblings do you have?
I have a brother and 2 sisters.
So there's 4 of you.
Yeah.
Are they all educators?
They were. My brother, for a while, taught, and he taught like an AN center. He then left that after the typical 3-year of a center program that you can handle. Mm-hmm. And so he went into real estate. So he's a realtor. But my sister, Angie, of course, whom you know.
Shout out to Crazy Angie.
Hello. Is now at East.
I learned that about a week ago. I saw her.
Yes.
She's at East.
And then my youngest sister teaches kindergarten.
Gotcha. In DPS?
In Burlington. So out by the Kansas border.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And then, of course, my husband teaches. Both my sister-in-laws teach. All in DPS.
Where is Keith? Where is he?
He's at John F. Kennedy.
He's a Kennedy. All right.
And, of course, that's where he graduated from.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What is he teaching over there?
He's teaching social studies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Keith. Shout out to him. Mm-hmm. I met him before I met you.
Yeah.
I think he was a teacher at Lincoln when I was a teacher. Or maybe a peer observer. He was serving Lincoln in some capacity when I was there a teacher.
Yeah.
I remember him before I met you.
Uh-huh. I think he might have been a teacher there when you were there. I don't remember either.
That was like 12 years ago. Oh, my God. Time flies. Good thing I've been bald my whole life. So nobody can tell.
Yeah, you don't even have... Well, what about your beard, though?
I try to keep it the same.
What?
When I shave my beard, I look like a tortilla. I have a tortilla face. I don't like my tortilla face. I need to keep some hair on my face to keep it decent. Gosh. So you guys are all a family of educators.
Yes.
What do you think that is due to? Is that, do you have a strong, was your dad a strong role model to you guys growing up, and you kind of saw in his leadership and his inclination towards education, like a clear path for you to follow, or it came from somewhere else? How about your mom?
She retired from Denver Public Schools, too. She was a facilitator when she retired, a literacy facilitator, again, another term I don't think we still have. But, yeah, I don't know. I just remember, going to school with them sometimes when we wouldn't have school and they would, and I don't know, I just running up and down the halls and getting carts we just were always like playing in a school, even in the summer when they went in there to set up rooms or whatever, I would be finding something that I could do that would be fun. So And it was just the language they always spoke. You know, my grandma retired from Denver Public Schools as well. So my aunt retired. She was a teacher at East for years. My uncle. So, I mean, as you know, every Sunday dinner is around it. I think it's just something that you're like, oh, well, this is what we do. And never regretted it. Oh, my gosh, teaching. I loved teaching. I got recruited out of that to do student advisor, and looking back on it, I think it's because I was so good at classroom management. I didn't have issues.
Probably.
You know? So then they pulled me out, put me in a student advisor.
Yeah, what a change.
Job. Kudos to all the student advisors and deans that do discipline all day. Seriously. Full respect.
Yeah, it's very taxing. It is incredibly taxing. And keeping that mindfulness about constantly humanize the work and making sure that as an advisor, you are also a teacher and you're working on teaching those social emotional skills or those behavioral skills and looking at kids as learners, even through behavior, and understanding that it's not only academic content, what they come to schools to learn, but they also come to learn to socialize with each other, to learn from their mistakes. And being an advisor and only focused on the social emotional challenges is exhausting. Mm-hmm. Many APs as well typically are involved on that role. And I think all of us who are principals at some point in our growth have to spend some time focusing on behavior. Mm-hmm. And we know how difficult it is and how special and also how important.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, yes.
At some point, did you always know that you wanted to be a school leader, or was it at some point where you realized, I think this is where I want to go? Did you have a realization, or was it in you your whole life?
I don't remember like having a cognizant, like when I was teaching, I'm definitely going to be a principal. But looking back, I mean, I've always been bossy, Nestor, you know? I mean, just bossy. I think eventually I would have absolutely pursued that. I think it got fast forwarded when I got pulled out of the classroom to do the student advisor. And I realized I didn't want to do the student advisor forever. And so that's when I got my principal's license, and I went through that, just knowing that, fine, you know, I could see myself there. Because then as a student advisor, you're also in a leadership role where you're really working along with, right, the principal and the assistant principal, and you're on that leadership team. And then, yes, it only seemed natural that's what I would do. But I would just, I don't know, had I not been pulled out, because I said no 5 times, right, to leaving the classroom.
You did.
Oh, gosh,
and
yes.
The 5 times were offers to be a student advisor, or you got other options to leave the classroom?
Oh, no, student advisor. Yeah, it was definitely, you have to be the student advisor. We need you. So I started negotiating what my schedule would be, and I did not want to leave the classroom. And the other thing is, you don't often go back either, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I definitely had a realization, and I think that's probably why I said no a few times to 5, is that would be it, you know? Chances are I wouldn't go back to the classroom. And that was sad, because I did love teaching. Oh, my gosh, I laughed every day.
Yeah. I
mean, I still do, you know. I mean, first of all, people are funny, and I'm funny, so you're going to laugh every day. But again, it's just something different. You remember.
I do.
Yeah, teaching special. Yeah,
I do. I've the best years of my professional life are still in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot to say, because here at CMS, I am deeply in love with every one of my teachers, my parents. Mm-hmm. But my best years were in the classroom with the kiddos. And I always think like a teacher, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That takes me to the time I decided to become a school leader, which you have a very clear role in the years that came after I made that decision. I was like I said, I was a high school teacher, and I remember being observed in my AP Spanish literature classes, being observed by evaluators who did not speak Spanish. And they were giving me positive feedback and areas for growth and somehow accurate, but never in the 4 years I came across a leader that understood what was really going on in the classroom. And to me, that was very interesting because I was praised by a clear CLO or by crisp, precise collaborative structures, or I was praised by the ratings. I think in 2014, I got the highest AP passing rates in the state, and it was like, oh my God, what a big deal. And that was always that celebration of those things that were measurable. But to me, what I saw was the most special were the things that nobody talked about. My evaluators, which was the relationships and the way kids would not skip class just to be in my class, and even their attendance sucked for everything else. And I always wonder what it would be like to be a school leader and notice those things. Would the school or would things be better for these kiddos? Particularly because my students were all native speakers and they were just newcomers or kids who just arrived from other countries. And then that's when I decided to go to GUST. And what was interesting about that time with you was I came to GUST with the heart, but no skills with regards to being a leader, right? Like I would watch you and I was like, oh my God, Jamie is amazing. Because that was your 8th year at GUST too. I think that's what you said in 2014. Was it 2014? Anyways,
it's all blended together.
Let's not talk about our age or anything.
Exactly.
Let's just leave it like that. But what I do remember is watching you and your leadership team and how clear your systems were about DDI, like data-driven instruction, and how there was a expected way of behaving towards analyzing student work and developing lesson plans, doing routine observation and feedback cycles and connecting with people. All those things were very clear to me, but also new. So I came with that heart and little skill, and it was that year where I had a lot of learning, and then I took off. And what I really loved about that time with you is that I really had you as a role model of what best practices were. And they really were best practices because I continued to implement them and obviously grow and mature and get better over the years. But gosh, that was phenomenal. And that takes me to one of the things I really wanted to ask you about leadership and what you believe are the attributes of a great leader. I see many of those attributes in you because I love you and I've seen you lead for multiple years. You were also an IS at some point, and I saw you also how you prepared and led our region. And I'm really curious to see from someone like you, with all the years that you have of leadership, if you could name those attributes of a really good, strong, powerful leader.
Yeah. You know, I have to start out with flexibility, sense of humor. I need a little fun. We're going to rally everyone to work as hard as we possibly can. We've got to highlight some fun and highlight the joy. I think an effective leader, it's almost the way that you feel, right, when you're with someone. So let me think about some of the compliments I've gotten that have meant the most. I want to do my absolute best for you, and I don't even know why, because you've never, ever explicitly demanded it or anything. It's because I know you believe in me. And that's powerful, right? To have someone who truly believes in you, your work, how effective you are, and sky's the limit on the potential. What can we do to support you and help you grow? So I think that's one piece. A supporter that will support me, be a problem solver with me, solution-oriented. Something else that you'll hear people tell school leaders is, you always seem to have the answer. You always seem to have an answer, right? And whether we do or not, it's perhaps the guiding questions in the discussion that we have with people that does lead us to a solution, right? But because it's the leader, I think we get more credit for having the solutions than really we're due. And experience has brought me some of those solutions and answers that years ago I wouldn't have had. I know, looking back, a strong attribute for me too, and one of my favorite leaders that I worked for, was the sense of confidence and presence. It was calming. When you think about, and I know this is even more of a personality, but that presence and that calming demeanor and that just confidence always just reassured me that we were on the right path, that we were doing the right things, that we were going to get the results that we wanted. And I'm talking about that versus someone who is more nervous or anxious or excited and seems to get really nervous and upset when something happens, no matter what that is. That then makes me nervous and anxious, right? And so I think, too, when I'm thinking about what we want to do and provide in the environment, in this space, for those that we're leading and working with, I think it is a sense of, oh, she's got this. Like, I'm really nervous right now. I don't know what to do, whether it be with a behavior or a family or, parents. It's causes a lot of anxiety for teachers to have a parent who is concerned or upset for whatever reason. And so to know that there's a school leader that will come in and calm everything down and bring everything to the table, that's reassuring. And I need that. I would look for a leader to provide that. So I just think that's, also an attribute. Resourceful. A leader anymore has got to be able to locate resources and bring them into their building and advocate for their building like no other. And that in itself can be a full-time job, right?
Oh, I mean,
you wrote the application for the early literacy grant. That's just one example, but it's constantly trying to look out there and see what other resources are there and how we can bring them in. How can we improve our building so the environment is looks clean and nice and newly painted, and because our kids deserve that, and our families don't want to walk into something that's completely outdated and
messy.
Right? Of course not. So there's so much. I mean, we could go on and on and on. And honestly, I've learned a lot from leaders who weren't effective. I learned a lot. I think all of those different experiences, of course, are what helps us become the leaders that we are. And in no way are we done growing. I should hope not. My staff is hoping not either.
I know. I hear you. I hear you 100%. One attribute that I see in you that I appreciate in great leadership is you have, as well as many other strong leaders, you have a very good, strong ability to listen. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't bring it up. because you really are a good
What?
listener.
I wasn't listening.
I wasn't paying attention. What? Yeah. That's one of the attributes that I see in strong leaders as well.
Yes, I agree.
And I have learned from leaders who struggle too.
Yeah.
And a common trend that I notice is that nervous, that not hysterical, I guess stressed. Stressed demeanor. Like they're so stressed that they are almost unapproachable. They are not available, and when they're present, they are also not available because they're not listening or they are focused on something else. Typically, are short on patience.
Because they're so stressed.
And it is one of the things that I always wonder about as a system. How can we help those growing leaders thrive? Because I think many people have the potential to be wonderful, fabulous leaders, but also the setup of or the conditions they have to lead in sometimes overwhelm them to the point where they cannot thrive. So as a leader like you or any leader that in a way have figured out a few good traits on the job, I think it's very powerful to have people that also mentors and, open the doors to have conversations like this, in the hope that younger leaders can look up to those practices and learn a little bit from them. Do you currently have leaders that you admire, that you think of them, whether they are school leaders or people whose stories you've read on a book, or what are the leaders that you have that you want to be like when you grow up?
I've had some fabulous mentors. And, each of them bring a characteristic or a quality that's just unique to them. I don't know that I would encompass like the entirety of anyone. I just was very fortunate in being a teacher and a leader to be able to observe and talk to people who like this, shared experiences. And oftentimes it was in reflecting back, because when you're a new leader, some of the things that you and I are dealing with, more often seem like a bigger deal because you're newer to them.
Yeah.
So for example, the first time, and of course I think I was a student advisor or AP, but the first time I ever really was completely disrespected and threatened and, by a parent was in a leadership role. And I remember being taken aback, like, what in the world? Like, this can't happen. This doesn't happen. And so I promise you, I did not shine or show confidence on my face, And so I'm just thinking back, and I was able to ask questions and kind of talk that through with a couple people. And it was very helpful to have someone that has experience. I mean, whether it was exactly like my situation or not is, it doesn't matter. We've all had experiences where people have become very, very angry and very emotional, right? And without the skills or the experience, that's something that we're not going to react to well, and we're definitely not going to be able to diffuse the situation as quickly as an experienced person can. So I think, doing a long little answer to this one, is that there's different people in my world and that happen in my world, and I know kind of which ones I would go to depending on the situation. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. And now I find myself too to be a person that other people come to, which is nice, especially if I have an answer for them or I can share a story.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I think that we're learning and we're observing and watching and learning all the time.
All the
That's
time.
our, I mean, honestly, we have mentors. We ran into 6 of them already, just in the half hour it took me to walk up here. I mean, they're just everywhere. And I think just human nature, we are always observing and picking up on how people interact and learning about that, because I think also an attribute of a school leader is you better have a pretty high EQ.
Yes.
And it's really, really important for you because relationships, that's your foundation. So you had better figure out how to connect with each and every person. And I remember one of the things that I would always share with leaders that I was supporting, whether Richies or school principals, when they would go sideways with a teacher or sideways with a parent, is that you're the leader. You no longer have the luxury of going sideways. That is not a luxury you have anymore. It is up to you to build that relationship with that teacher. And you better figure out how to build a bridge. And it needs to be, it's got to be a real relationship. We all are human beings and we catch on to fake.
Very
I get
easy.
your fake smile. So it's got to be genuine.
Yeah.
And so however long it takes you, that's your job.
That's very true. I love that you're able, I love that you have the ability to see in most people or in a lot of people something you can learn from.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that you have this person on an altar for having all the attributes of good leadership. Like, it sounds that you pick up on different skills on different people. Mm-hmm. Do you have any books or specific reads where you draw from? For example, I have right there Tim Ferriss' book, Tribe of Mentors.
Oh.
It's really good. It's not related to education. It's just to celebrities, athletes, and all kinds of people. But he crafted 11 questions that he asked all of them. Man, that's fantastic. Really, really good stuff. So for leadership, I am working on that book right now. And I have others, but I'm curious to see if you have any.
My problem is I can't remember anything in regards to titles or I read it and then it's gone. I would say one I talked to Keith a lot about is, and see now I'm not going to be able to remember the title, and but it's about Abraham Lincoln and the leadership team that he put around himself, in that he deliberately chose people to fill his cabinet who didn't necessarily agree with him. And I remember saying that a few different times, to different people, is that please don't just look at me and nod. I don't, have all the answers. And if I do, then it's going to be the same way that I've been doing it. And so ask questions and challenge. Tell me that you think there's a better way. Otherwise, Jamie's going to be the same principal that she was 14 years ago, 15 years ago. I don't know if it was that long. I don't mean to age myself. I do use Miss Claire, but
we'll edit this out.
Yeah, thank you. But I just, that whole premise of, I really don't want the yes and nodding and smiling because I'm a school leader, right? I don't want that at all. In fact, I want the contrary. I want the leadership role to be shared and felt and carried by everyone in the building. Because 100%. Right now, we got a lot of work to do. Ellis is red. And Jamie single-handedly is not going to change that. And so one of the, I've said this before too, one of the highest compliments I got in being in a leadership team meeting, and we were fishbowled by another school's leadership team to kind of watch how our leadership team was interacting. And a couple of the leaders of the other school had come in late, and we had already gotten started, so they just kind of joined in around. afterwards, they didn't know who I was. And so when I came up to introduce myself, and ask them if they wanted to sit around and debrief for a minute or two.
Not knowing who you were.
They did not know who
Okay.
I was. They said, "Oh, my goodness. I thought she was the principal." Now, there we go, right? Absolutely. My job isn't to be in there running the show, doing all of the talking and the thinking. It's just like as a classroom teacher. If I was in there doing the heavy lift with all my middle schoolers, I would have crawled out of school every day. They've got to be engaged, and they got to own it, and they got to run it.
You don't have Facebook, right? Or do you?
Oh, my gosh. No, I don't have Facebook.
Okay, you should.
No, I shouldn't.
You should. You should have Facebook and Instagram.
No, I cannot have Facebook. I don't want people strolling all through my business.
I'm asking you because this podcast has a Facebook page, and I recently posted a quote that says, "Build a team so strong, no one can point out the leader."
Exactly.
And that's exactly what you're bringing up. And I have a bunch of likes on that, and other leaders are resharing it and tagging each other. And that's kind of the common agreement on what a good sign of strong leadership is. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you know this guy, Lao Tzu. I think he's a Chinese philosopher from, 1,000 years ago. He talks about the signs of a great leader is when his work is complete, everybody look at each other and say, "We did it ourselves."
Yes.
It's that idea of just when you don't care who takes the credit, anything is possible. And is that implicit humility that comes with, let's just get engaged on the task. Forget about who is the leader. And I always take that by heart too, because that's what I'm trying to do here at CMS. So I love that. That takes me to when I was at GOST with you too, how huge your SLT was.
Oh, it still is.
Still
at
is.
Ellis. Oh, yeah. Over 20.
Yes, I love that. And I took that with me. Every year I've been here, I don't put elections for my committees.
Me neither. You want to go?
This is the sign-in sheet, signed up, and I will also tell you when we have our meetings. I would love every single one of you to be there.
For sure. More the merrier.
Yeah, it's very, very meaningful. Gosh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. You also know that, I have been a leader only in DPS. And actually, my life, I've been in the U.S. for 14 years. The only place I've lived in the U.S. has been in Colorado. And my professional life has been mostly in DPS. So I don't know what it is like to be a leader in any other context. But I know that in DPS, another strong side of leadership is to be clear on what we understand for equity. And wow, having 30 different languages in one school. How big is your school? How many kiddos do you have?
We are only about 375, 380 students.
380.
Yeah.
That is significant.
Right?
That is very significant.
Yes.
And I do know that the clarity or the more we have thought about what equity means to us as leaders, the more, I guess, impactful we can be. Mm-hmm. And I definitely want to know what you think equity is and what your experiences are with it.
Well, I think that we will all agree that our experiences with it are still, we have systemic racism right now, and we still have systems in place. It always comes up quickest for me as the GT identification. Secondary is going to get into your honors, the students that are attending those classes, special ed. It's just access and opportunity, right? And so right now, when I think about the students that are in the school, are all of my students provided an opportunity to do whatever they want, right? First of all. And that could be for all sorts of different reasons, whether it's, race, language, in my case. I've got newcomers that are walking around with iPads that they speak into and use as a translator still. And so what we can do, whatever we can do, to provide them the opportunities that they deserve. Behaviors, and providing the students who are struggling right now with those behaviors, same opportunities. They have to be able to stay in class for them to be provided those opportunities. I think we have some systems, some work to do just ourselves, because the biases that go around with that, especially, behaviors and teachers thinking, that they don't have to teach, for example. I think you might remember in a secondary school, this is always a big one, because in the contract it speaks about, and I'm talking about the teacher contract, it speaks about a disruptive student, right? So it's classified as disruptive. And there's language in the contract that says that child can be removed from a teacher's classroom if they're habitually disruptive.
Yep.
And so it just some of the language pieces that are in different pieces everywhere, I guess I struggle with still, because if a child can't be in the classroom, we're denying the opportunity right there. And so I worry about that. I worry about the languages. I worry about the fact that I don't have any black students identified as gifted and talented right now, let alone highly GT. I worry that the behaviors are still in my school primarily, and not primarily, I'm saying that above 50% over the girls, it's boys, and it's boys of color. And so how many sessions can we have around, the biases that we have, the expectations we have, the environment that we set up, the relationships that we build with our students and our families before this will change, I guess is a question. And we don't have an answer, otherwise we would have fixed it a long time ago. And it's important to me that children in elementary school, each and every one of them, feel connected, valued, and respected, and a part of something larger than themselves, right? That's human nature. We all want to feel that way. And so really, I guess at the core of it is every single child that steps into my school should feel that way. And if they don't, then what is it that's keeping them from feeling that way? And that needs to be changed. That needs to be addressed.
100%. Here at CMS, we've been talking about equity and how can we deconstruct the word a little bit more to make, I guess, a stronger meaning out of it. And we were able to talk about equity in 3 other words: opportunity, dignity, and love. And the idea of dignity as looking at every child as somebody who is worth it. You are worth it, the effort. You're worth everything that we put into you. Particularly because when we treat a kiddo with dignity, they are not invisible. And the problem is particularly when we design our lesson plans and when we're delivering instruction, if we're not clear about that diversity of language or background or histories, we tend to create lessons that are sterile in the sense of, this is the content, this is the standard, I'm going to provide you with grade level instruction, but I am not going to touch you in the experiences or in the context that might be meaningful to you in order to internalize the content that I'm delivering, whether it is I'm teaching fractions or talking about frogs. And when we talk about dignity, we're talking about making every child worth the effort and also not making them invisible. And that translates into the systems we put in place for lesson plan feedback or when we do classroom walkthroughs, always being intentional of how many kids were able to to answer your question? How many kids understood your question? Do you use other resources to reach out to them in Spanish and English? Here's only Spanish and English. 98.6% of our kids are minorities, particularly Spanish speakers. So yeah, I really resonate with what you're sharing. And it makes me wonder on your connections between equity and Black excellence. What connections can you make between those two?
Well, I think that it's encompassed into also our equity work, is our Black Excellence Plan. I think elevating, kind of what I just said too, is where are our Black students? What's the evidence that we have that they're thriving? What's our connections to their families? Do they see themselves in the classroom? Do they feel that they are connected and a part of that family? And in some way, they have to be and deserve to be. In the same way another white child would see themselves, whether in a textbook or in a story or whatever it may be. And provided that same relationship, connection, belief. But I think at a more elevated level, in that because of what has happened and what our Black families have been living through, this is going to have to be a little more elevated. We're going to really need to know that our Black students are making growth. We're going to really need to know what you're doing to build those relationships and connections with the families. That it is important and a part of your mission and vision as a school and as an educator, as a teacher. And it really comes down to the connection. I want families to feel comfortable, welcomed, valued, and that their child matters as much as every single child that walks through that door. So a lot of that is outreach. A lot of that is internal embracing and celebrating. And I think just it's going to be a constant effort and work that we have to do. We are increasing the amount of our Black families that are attending. And we've done, some of the many things that you may have done too, is reaching out and doing interviews to learn more about what is important for them and their students at school, to hear about their school experience, and maybe what stems from that, and what was special and what was harmful, and to be able to begin to hear the stories that we need to learn more about in order to address them and change the experience that their children will have.
One of the ideas that originated this podcast here at CMS was my desire to learn from my families and just sit with them and have conversations about precisely what is Black excellence, or as a Latino immigrant, what other difficulties have shaped the way you see education when you have to migrate and go through all the hurdles. I only have one Black family, and mom is very shy, so I haven't had any luck getting her to sit with me, but
You will.
I think at some point I will.
Yeah.
I love that family too, by the way. She had 3 kiddos. One of them already graduated, Lorena. She is a 7th grader right now. But we have Khalil in 2nd and Michaela in 5th. So
Nice.
on a personal level, do you see any trouble or any contradictions or any issue at all with you not being a Black person or you not being a minority, but being a leader that is in service of those communities? I'm asking because actually it's a trend in my previous podcast when I interview somebody who's white or somebody who's American. They typically feel, honestly, they feel intimidated by the question. And I hear answers that I love and honored and respect. Answers like, I am not black, so I don't feel competent defining what black excellence is. Or in this topic of race, I don't know how to position myself because I know that my ancestors have had privileges, and everybody takes the conversation around race and black excellence and equity towards their own lived experiences, and sometimes their privileges that they themselves had makes them a little bit embarrassed or a little bit uncomfortable in talking about what black excellence is. Mm-hmm. And me as a Latino, as a white Tino, and because of my own story, I really have no problem in talking about those topics. Mm-hmm. But I do feel obviously humble because I don't know everything that needs to be known about those things. But for sure, as I hear you talk, your vision, your leadership in Ellis with that huge, diverse group of people seems to be very inclusive and on point with regards to where you want to move the kids and their families.
Yeah, and curious. You know what? Honestly, I think it comes down to listening. I mean, I really, really do. I don't have all of the answers. I won't be able to navigate it perfectly. But what I will and want to do is listen to your story. I want to identify what the most important things are for you that you're bringing. And I want to make sure that I'm sensitive to that, so that when I'm supporting you and your child, that I can be sensitive to that, and that I can be genuine, and as genuine as I can be, knowing as much as you want to share with me. What I want to do is build the relationships, hear the story, here's what is important, here's the dream of what I want for my child, right? And that's where I want to connect with people. That's where I want to go.
Yeah. And I think that's the most powerful way to establish any kind of relationship.
Yes.
Whether it is with our kids and their families, or getting to hire a new teacher, or getting to know your new boss. Yeah. Do you have a new boss?
I do. I had to think about it for a minute.
What collaborative are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm glad that I just reviewed. One. I can't, I can't keep track. Everyone in TPS is laughing right now. I don't know if it's a region, a collaborative, a cohort. I don't know. And, just like everyone else, I've had a revolving door. I think, and I remember principals telling me this when I was in IS, you're my fourth IS in 5 years. I mean, mm-hmm. For whatever reason, that's just the way it is. And so I don't know. I think I'm on my third or fourth
Yeah, you don't know.
Yep.
This is my 5th year, and I'm having my 6th IS.
See?
And now they're obviously not called IS, they're called directors. So when my director came for the first time, I walked her around the school, and in the main office, there was my secretaries and everybody, and I introduced her as our new director. Yeah. And everybody was, are you leaving? Because director is director, and this is the translation to principal. Yeah. I was like, no, I'm not leaving. That's a new name for directors. But it is true, having that deep curiosity and awareness of the people you serve is the foundation for any kind of meaningful relationship. And I think whether or not you belong to that race or share the same story or background, your ability to serve depends on how sensitive you are to their needs and how much you understand those needs. Mm-hmm. And then the magic happens, I guess, if you're sincere and open to meeting those needs. Mm-hmm. The last question I had for you was, if there is any, what system or what structures in our current educational system you would like to see changed in your lifetime? What is going on in our current education system that you would love to see change in your lifetime?
Yes. Oh, gosh. All sorts of things, probably. I would love to see more resources and funding put into our special ed department. I think right now what we're able to provide for support and resources with some of our students who are identified needing more, I think we're falling short right now. And for all sorts of reasons. I mean, ideally, these students should be provided support in the classroom in a pushed-in model. They shouldn't be a pull-out model, but because they have such large caseloads so often, you can't figure that out, you know? You have to have, similar skills in multiple grades, and but in a perfect world, that would be a push-in model. We don't need to call out students and have them leave the room. It's such an old traditional model. Honestly, I know I'm only 29, but I remember when I was a girl, and much the same model, right? I remember sitting in a grade level classroom. We all knew why those students left that classroom at a certain time. Why is that okay? I finally fought the system with lunchroom managers about you don't send or safety pin that note on a student's shirt or send a slip with them or give them just a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because they owe lunch money, right? Because that was an old traditional system too. I remember at Gust, in fact, fighting that. And I used to set aside thousands of dollars to pay off at the end of the year all of those ridiculous fines because I was like, never will you not feed them, and no, you will not give them any sort of note right then with the cold sandwich. Yeah. The kid has nothing to do with it. Don't call out the kid. Again, opportunities, right?
100%.
I want, the opportunity. So some of those things, which I think that we can get a hold of, but the pull-out program, I just am so not a fan of. And I, for a while at Gust, had a large enough, population because there's a lot more students there. Mm-hmm. So I could have, enough mild mod teachers that we could do a push-in. It makes all the difference in the world. Imagine a push-in model when you already have teachers maybe doing small groups or something anyway, right? That now feels, I'm just like everyone else.
It feels great, not only for the kid, but for everybody in the classroom, including the teacher and the other kids.
Thank you.
Yep.
And we could go on. ESL is the same thing. I mean, here we go, pulling out our students, but we don't have enough resources. And so we can't do a beautiful push-in model for that. So anyway, that would be one of them, to somehow rethink the entire system that requires pull-out. A child, especially in elementary school, well, anywhere, please. Middle school is going to be better. My gosh, no. They just shouldn't be pulled out of class. It's awkward. All right, I went on and on. What else? I do really like the senior team lead model. Mm-hmm. And I think that, and I loved having the full day Richie, when I had Richie interns, mm-hmm. yeah, and the Learn to Leads. Mm-hmm. I think the value of learning alongside someone in that school and on site mm-hmm. is incredible. Mm-hmm. I really do. I am discouraged because I have a Richie now. I was doing the full-time job first. Mm-hmm. And then we got to do the Richie after the full-time job. And, of course, that's because of funding. I understand why. I worry, though, because the experience that you're able to gain and the true learning alongside a leader, being there every single day and doing the work, it's incredible. It can't be compared to. And so why we haven't figured out something like a senior team lead for principals is interesting to me. Then to see principals in a school in their first year be so overwhelmed. You know, I mean, no district probably has as many different platforms, start there, that you've got to be able to navigate. And I'm not a fan of Oracle. I don't know what you're thinking about it yet, but Oracle, no. You know, we can't even figure out the correct manager to approve.
Mm-hmm. It is crazy.
Thank you. But I just think a little bit more support and to raise our leaders. Mm-hmm. I really like how we are now using the expertise of our teachers who are experts. Yeah. Absolute experts. Mm-hmm. I mean, why in the world anyone would want me in there now trying to grow them and evaluate them in their practice in elementary school when they can look down the hall and see one of my master teachers, and it's a no-brainer. And so I've been waiting and thinking about, I don't understand why we're not using that same model in different ways. Right. Yeah. I also don't understand why I don't have SPED teacher interns. Why aren't we raising our own? Remember what we did with the DTRs? Remember when you were there?
You had a big healthy pipeline.
10 of them. Why don't we have those right now in our buildings for SPED? Yeah. We can't get enough teachers. We got to raise our own. Mm-hmm. So we got to be proactive. I guess something I would change is that oftentimes I feel like as a district, and no judgment, Alex, no judgment. It's all love. But I hate feeling as if I'm on my heels and I'm being reactive. Mm-hmm. I do much better proactive. Yeah. And so let's identify some of the things that are going on, and then let's get ahead of it. Let's get the partnerships that we had at one time with DU and get all of these interns into our buildings on a track to become a special ed teacher for our students.
100%. Those three elements, like the senior team lead model for principals that can help other principals or other aspiring principals to grow and become effective. It is very, to me, it's a little bit sad and disappointing to see these super amazing people who step into the role of being principal, and then a year and a half later you see them and they're like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore.
For sure.
And typically you see principals making it probably 5-7 years, 3 years. Yeah. And then they tap out because of how difficult it is. One thing with regards to systems that I would love to see change in my lifetime is that I would like for people to never be okay with having 35 children stuffed in a classroom and think that that's appropriate. Maybe you can help me understand why it makes sense, but I don't see a genuine connection between living the value of equity and having in a contract that it is okay for 35 children to be in a classroom. I have 2 sons, just 2, in my house. They could not be more different than each other. They couldn't. I cannot imagine those 2 being taught by me at the same table. Like, I don't know how to teach you and you at the same time, because the way you learn has nothing to do with the way you learn. And somehow, when 35 children show up into a school, we are okay putting them in 4 walls with 1 teacher.
Well, honestly, we're going to have to rethink that too, Nestor. I think some of the answers really are us being boxed into some of the traditions of grade levels, for instance, right? Stop at the grade levels, because as school leaders, we're always like, oh my goodness, I've got a low 2nd grade, and here I've got, so many 4th graders, right? Like nothing's ever even. Mm-hmm. So maybe if we could just get past the whole idea of grade levels, and put some groups of kids together with some teachers who are expert in a content and you know, I'm always and will always be a proponent of platooning, and I come from secondary like you do. I don't understand how we can ask an elementary school teacher to do what they do. I think it's phenomenal. To me, just thinking about the standards, right, that they've got to work their kids to mastery on, is why are they trying to do that with all the contents? Enough. Yeah. I mean, no.
I don't get it.
They've got a platoon. I mean, yes, I understand the need for elementary school students to build a relationship and have a nurturing teacher. Like, I get that part. But at the same time, we're going to have to rethink what we're doing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be boxed in like we're boxing it in, right? I don't think it's got to be stuck in grade levels. And in some cases, I don't think it should be. I mean, you just talked about your two boys. Well, we can look at any given classroom, and you're going to see a huge range of not only skills, but developmental
interests,
range,
passions, right? Curiosities. Everybody's like all over the place.
Sure. Social, emotional, just a huge range. Well, who are we to say that because you just turned 7, you're going there?
Just because you turned 7. It doesn't make sense. I swear to God, it doesn't.
Right.
And I don't know how much we believe we can achieve, or how much opportunity, how much access, how much dignity. Like, however much you want to deconstruct the word equity, I don't know how much we can keep trying to convince ourselves that it is okay. And I am saying this because I always want to go to the absolute best, most distinguished teacher that exists, and see that teacher in action with the ideal classroom. And even in the utopic conditions, you will see kids who are not engaged or identified with or finding a meaningful experience by interacting in that environment, because there is so much you can do as one human being serving 35 kids. So I believe exactly that. Why should we group them by age? That's not even real life. Like at work, I am the principal. I have people older than me, people younger than me. Sure. And the way we build relationships and trust, and the way we move forward the ship has nothing to do with your birth date. It has more to do with everything else, absolutely everything else. So I really want to keep thinking about how can we propose a different model that makes more sense for kids. Let's see. They will probably try to talk again. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. That is one thing that I just don't understand, why in 2022 we just think it's okay. I don't think we think it's okay. I talk to everybody, and everybody's like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. But we're entertained by many other urgent things, that talking about 35 kids in a classroom, that it's already in a contract, like legislature, blah, blah, blah. Come on, man. Who has time to talk about this? They're going to
come back at you and say it's your school budget.
Yeah. So
you budgeted that.
How much power do we have over our budgets, though? Right? Like, how much... Yeah.
Well, and even if you had 35, you're in elementary school, you would have to do para time in there as well. Contract says.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, teachers, after a certain number, 28 or something like that, get so many hours of para time, which are positions that are not always easy to fill.
Well, yeah.
And then you have to get them trained.
But that's elementary. Then you go to high school, and you are under contract. It is okay for you to have every period packed with 35 kids.
Well, actually, I once tried to push back on that when I was teaching 8th grade, because I had a class of 40, and they said, no, it's actually the number of students you see in a day.
Which is 185.
Right. So they said because one of my other classes was smaller, that I was right at the 180.
That yeah.
Try 48th graders in a classroom. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember grading my AP literature papers for. I think I had 4 sections of AP. Classes were smaller. I have like 28. I was grading hundreds of papers, 5 pages per paper. I was like over 500 pages of paper on a week, because how long is it going to take you for you to grade a paper and give feedback to a kid without going too far so the feedback becomes irrelevant? So you got to like bust your ass grading things.
Yes.
So yeah, that's one thing that I really believe that I hope I can see differently, or that I can see change before my time is over in this earth, because they deserve it. And if we continue to focus on equity, if we continue to focus on seeing each kid as individuals, and if we continue to focus on those things, maybe we can drive towards that. We do know already that research clearly points out that having 10 kids in a classroom is more meaningful for the teacher and the kid than having 20, and 20 better than having 30. So we do know that for a fact. It's how are we going to allocate those resources?
Yep. How many students do you have in your classrooms?
On average, about 24.
Okay.
It's not that bad.
Nope.
It's not that bad. I have one second grade class at 28, but that's still too much. But yeah, I hope we can see those things change. How is your ESL model at Ellis with 30 different languages? That's a rough one.
Yeah, she's just amazing. I mean, it's a pull-out, program. So she pulls out to provide the additional minutes to the students who are the non-Spanish speakers. So obviously we have a full Tinley program for our Spanish speakers with the ELA-S, but she pulls them out, uses iPads a lot with the translation in the beginning. And the other thing that I've learned is how quickly these children learn a new language. If that's the language that my friends are all speaking outside at recess, they're playing Foursquare. All of a sudden, she's been here for a week. It's just amazing.
Unbelievable.
And then the other thing that warmed my heart this morning is I have a second grader, and he speaks Mongolian and has only been with us for a short time. And comes into the building, and his classmates said good morning to him in Mongolian. And the teacher said that they had practiced that, and they were all doing that in the morning. Right?
That's awesome.
And again, it goes back to the welcoming, the connections, the relationships, and that's and being genuine, and that's just, oh my gosh, it feeds my soul every single day.
Wow.
Yeah.
How beautiful.
Isn't it?
That's super cool.
Yeah. And that was just this morning's story. I got a million of them. Yeah, it keeps us going, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jamie. This has been amazing.
Good.
I really appreciate it. I was very much looking forward to this opportunity, and it was worth it.
I thought so too. And I was on my best behavior. I didn't crack a lot of jokes. Kept everything in line. No cuss words, nothing. Everything clean.
It's pretty good behavior. Thank you.
I'm still sad I didn't wear my hat backwards.
Well, we might have to do it again.
New topic.
You bring your...
When you get onto your next cycle of questioning.
Yes,
I do. And do round 2.
I do. I definitely do. Before we wrap this off, is there any message you want to share with the leadership community as we move forward with this year, post-pandemic? Many new leaders might be listening to this. Is there any message you have for them?
My goodness, just thank you for taking on the challenge. You do have what it takes. Reach out. Ask for support if needed. Do not lose your sense of humor. When challenged, remember it's not all about you. When screamed at, remember it is not all about you, and sometimes has nothing to do with you. And so just listen and drink wine.
Yes, that's good advice. And you exercise too.
Sure.
Yeah. So exercise, drink wine,
Well,
sleep well.
Yes. Oh, I'm a sleeper.
Sleep
too.
well.
Oh, I'm a good sleeper. I'm telling you, I can sleep.
I'm a mess when I don't sleep.
Oh, I am too. I need 8 to 10 during the week, 10 to 12 on the weekends, so I can bank them. And that's all my life. Got to have that. But then, I mean, really what it comes down to it, if I don't feel good and I'm not in a place where I can take on some other people's anxiety or nervousness or sadness. I mean, you know, as a leader, you get approached by everyone, and people are sharing stories with you that you don't necessarily need to hear. Yeah. And yet, because they're sharing them with you, you need to hear. Yeah. And so to be able to take that on and carry that, like you've got to feel good and be on your game to do that work. Otherwise, it'd beat you down.
It will.
Yes.
Even when you're on your game and at your best, you listen to some stories and they beat you down.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
Oof.
Yep.
That's great advice.
Yes.
Well, Jamie, you're a treasure to all of us. I love you very much. Thank you for your time.
Love you right back at you.
Hopefully we can do this again, and thank you so much.
Hey, maybe next time with a glass of wine, though.
There you go.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right.
Thank you. I want to
what
hug.
Fun! Oh, that was so much fun.
You're amazing.
Oh, you're going to have to cut some things out probably, but
I will.
I'll leave it up to you.